Welcome back to Way of the Wrench, and on today's very special episode, Creech is getting legs. Yep, that's it. All my parts are in, so it's time to start putting legs on, maybe a grounding strap, and a couple other little things that need to happen in the bottom of the cabinet. Whoo, let's go. So in order to put your legs on, you're gonna need some tools. So to be able to put your legs on, you're gonna need a 5/8 socket and socket wrench. To put on the screws for the brackets on the back, you're gonna need a 1/4 inch nut driver or a 1/4 inch nut driver with a 1/4 inch on the end. And also to drill pilot holes for those screws, we're gonna need a drill and a 7/64 drill bit. Now, I've also put a little bit of masking tape on here to visually show me how deep I should be able to drill with this so that I don't actually drill through the cabinet, because now that we have our vinyl artwork, this is super duper important, so please don't do that. Okay, other things we're gonna need some wood glue, because we have to glue in these little corner braces from pinballcabinet.com from the flatpack kit. I've already off camera kind of pre-sprayed the black, so the pieces that I'm gonna see are gonna be painted black. I left the other side porous so that I can put some wood glue in it. And then obviously all your parts, like your leg, pretty. And we're gonna need the brackets for the back. We're also gonna need the leg protectors. We're gonna need our pinball leg bolts, a bag of screws for the back, and lastly, our leg levelers. So first up, we're gonna put some glue. Don't go cheap out on it, but don't put so much you make a big mess on the back of our blocks, and then we can go ahead and put our legs, leg protectors, and bolts in. Okay, now you don't want to crazy tighten these, because you're more than likely just going to strip the encased nut in the bracket at the back. So kind of choke up on the handle. And a little tip, if you leave these not loose, but just not crazy tight, that kind of lets the cabinet move a little bit more realistically, and it's a little easier for your nudges. And if you have any squeeze out, now is the time to clean this up before it dries. Remember, wood glue is water soluble at this point, but if you let it dry, you're gonna have a tough time taking it out. Okay, then go ahead and do the other 3 legs. Now, before we drill the pilot hole for these screws that go on the back of the bracket, we are gonna take a hammer and a center punch, and we're gonna make it right in the center, so we get a nice spot so that our drill doesn't wander, make a hole off center, and then we can't get a screw in. Okay, front legs are done, so I'm just gonna spin this on the table and get this off the table so we can do the back. Cool, legs are on, let's get it off this table. Now that we have this cabinet on legs, I kind of think I'd like to do the stuff that's at the bottom of the cabinet, so that as we start putting shelves and things on top, we don't have to try to get underneath and do all that later. So let's take a look at what we got to do on the inside. So these are all the kind of things that we need to do in the bottom of the cabinet. Now, the last time I put in these cable management runners, I put them in at the very end, and I kind of had to work around everything I'd already bolted in. I want to do this first, so that way everything else goes around and into them so they look nice. And other things we got to do is put the computer fan and grill in there. I have my base shaker here. Now, I don't have 2 of them this time. I've only got 1 with the kit, which is probably more than enough. So instead of doing a front and back, I kind of think I'm going to put this as close as I can to the middle of the cab, probably just right in front of the subwoofer. Now, this is the subwoofer that's going to go in upside down there. I did make a little bit of an oopsie, not really. I kind of fell in love with this Rockford Fosgate, which is a 6.5 inch sub, and this hole has been pre-done for you guys for a 6-inch sub. So if you don't want to do anything to fix this, put in a 6-inch sub. So I've got a router. I'm going to show you how to just clean this hole up a little bit bigger so that I can mount that. We want to put our power on-off switch here, and I might have to do a little modification to either the button or the hole to get that to fit flush mounted from underneath. And then I also want to put another one of these USB pass-throughs somewhere at the front so I can access. And then kind of the last thing probably for this video is the grounding strap. And to do that, we're going to have to put in all our metal components. So let's start off with these cable management runners. Okay, once again, I am kind of limited because of the holes already placed where they are, which is not a big deal. It just means I got to do things differently. So instead of putting these like that, I'm going to have to kick them up like that so that I can get by this fan placement. And then where the power switch is, it's going to hit here. So what I'm going to end up doing is kind of chopping out a section here. We'll see some wires go by, but at least we'll be able to get that in there. So one at the front, 2 and kind of a half at the side, so this will be cut in half, one there with the joining pieces. And then these will be for the shelves. I'm assuming I'm going to end up with about 2 shelves. This will be one, and then part of this will go there with a joiner piece, and then the rest of it will go to this piece on another shelf. And if I need another one maybe up in here, I actually have, I think, one of these left of the white, so if I put it up there, you won't even ever see it too. And then these are pretty easy to use. Just make sure the surface is clean that you want to stick them to, and then on the back there is a sticker. You just peel it off, and then this is a self-adhesive stick. And when you go to put it on, you got to think that this lid needs to come on and off. So if you put it right against the surface, it might make that a bit tricky. So what I'm going to do here is put about 4 or 5 post-it notes, so both have a stack of 4 or 5, and that way when you put it down and stick it, there'll be a little gap underneath so you can take the lid off a lot easier. Next up is the power button for the PC. Now I have an old virtual pin button here, rectangular button that I wanted to use, and it doesn't quite fit. So rather than trying to buy one that will fit, I think I'm just going to take a little bit off the side of this rectangle shaped hole until it does fit. And then we need to make a little wooden block for the top so that we can get this flush mounted in there. So for me, I'm going to just use a little air grinder here with a little carbide burr on it. But for you guys at home that maybe don't have that, you can just get a wood rasp file and just take away that edge until it fits. There we go. So I've got this button pre-installed inside of our painted wood block here. The unpainted side's going to get a little bit of glue, and then that's going to go down like that. And then I'm going to stick a heavy metal weight on there just to let it set. All right, next up is drilling a hole for this USB pass-through. So that way I can take a USB stick and just from the front and underneath the cab, I can plug in a USB key and transfer files or add some tables, whatever I need to. So just to figuring out where this would go, I don't want it too close to the edges here because that's where I'm going to have LED light strips eventually for the under cabinet stuff. So, and it doesn't need to be out here. So I'm kind of thinking maybe somewhere about here. I think that's not too picky. I did in my previous build have fans there, so now that I don't have them there, there's some space here. So I'll probably put it somewhere right around about there. Now I'm just going to use a hole saw to put this in. I would not just go right through because what's going to happen is it'll tear out on the other side. Start the hole and drill about halfway through, and then you could drill from the other side with this in the hole that's already gone through, and that way it won't tear out for sure. So the hole that's in the cabinet is 135 millimeters. So you can see that it is sitting in the middle of where this rubber surround is for our speaker. So as the speaker pulses in and out, we're going to have it hit here on the cabinet, which will prematurely wear this, and it'll probably actually literally cause some clipping and some problems with the speaker. So we need to go to this outer mounting area, which is about 145, 146. So we need to make that hole bigger. So there is a whole bunch of ways of doing this. We could lay it out with a pencil and take our time with the jigsaw and just cut that out a little bigger. That's one way, and it won't be perfect, but you're going to be covering it up with a sub anyway. The other way would be is if you had a hole saw this size and you had a hole saw the next size up, then you could do a trick where you basically drill into a piece of scrap wood with just the centering drill for the hole saw, then put the hole saw bit into here, into the smaller size, and then screw that piece of wood up to it, to the bottom of the cabinet temporarily. And then you can use that centering hole to drill the bigger hole saw. However, that's a very expensive way of doing it. These hole saws, once they get bigger than like 1.5 inches, 2 inches, they're really quite pricey. So another way we can do this is with a router. So let me show you. All right, so this is a router. Now, if we wanted to spend time and make ourselves a little temporary wooden jig with the proper hole size that we want in it, then we could use a trim flush routering bit and just simply open up that hole. However, I'm going to show you something I think that's even easier. All right, so this has a trim flush router bit, and what I've done is I've taken off the bearing. This was the original size of that bearing, and put in a smaller one. And so what this bearing usually does is this edge of the bearing rides against the template or your jig, and the edge of the cutter is usually this size here, so it just trims flush with everything on your part. Now, because I've taken it out and put in a smaller bearing, when this rides against the surface, it's actually going to allow this amount of cutting, which in this case is 2 millimeters per side, really important to remember, so that when I go across the previous hole, it's actually going to make part of the hole where the cutter is 4 mil bigger in diameter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this touching just the bottom edge of the hole and router out the previous hole 4 millimeter bigger from one side of the cabinet. Then I'm going to go from the underside, and this bearing is now going to ride along the surface that I just made 4 mil bigger, and it's going to once again cut another 4 mil in diameter bigger. So one pass from the top is going to make 4 mil bigger. One pass from the bottom is going to make it now 8 mil bigger. And then if I go back to the top, I will make that 12 millimeters bigger. And then all I got to do after that is put this bearing back in on the top and just trim flush the last little bit that we were using to ride on. And then this hole will now be 12 millimeter bigger, which is exactly what I'm looking for. All right, so in case that didn't make sense, I'm going to explain it again visually. So if we take our piece of wood that has our original hole in it here. And we start with the router with the bearing touching just somewhere down at the bottom. We're going to end up cutting about 2 mil off of each side. Now if I take the router and I put it on the bottom, that bearing is going to now ride over to this surface because this is now gone. And that's going to cut out another extra 2 mil here. Then if I take the router and put it back from the top side, it'll ride in the even deeper spot, which will cut an extra 2 mil here. And then if I put the bigger bearing back on and go from the bottom, it'll ride against here and it'll trim flush this off. And that will be 6 mil per side, or 12 millimeter bigger in diameter, because we're going to go around the circle, and that's exactly what I need. And to test my theory, I just grabbed a piece of scrap wood and used the router bit and put it against the edge, and it is cut 2 millimeters off away from the original surface. So when we use this inside that speaker hole, we're going to get 2 mil per side, or 4 millimeter in diameter. See? Beautiful. So now we just got to go from the underside. All right, there's a shot from under the cab. Now one more time from the top. Okay, now we just have to change out this bearing size on the end. Okay, now this bearing is the same diameter as the cutter, so one more final pass from underneath, riding on the biggest hole we got in there, and that will now be 145 millimeters in. All right, hole's all done. Now normally when you're making subwoofer boxes, the speaker goes in like this into that enclosure hole. However, we want that music blasting outwards, so we're going to flip this over. So when you flip this over, you're going to have a hard time centering it. So what I do is get underneath and kind of move it back and forth until it is completely centered underneath, and then you can just use a pencil and transfer over those hole locations. And while you're at it, if you're OCD like me, this looks horrible to me. So I'm going to take even more time to not only center it, but even get that punch logo sitting straight in the cabinet. Once again, doing a pilot hole drill with a 3/32 drill with some tape on it, so I don't have to go all the way through and see those holes from the other side. And this is for a number 8x1 screw that I'm using. And I'm going to do the same thing with this cover from underneath. So center it, mark it with a pencil, center punch and drill it, so that way I don't have to accidentally drill into my speakers. Ooh, snazzy. Next up is part of that SSF kit from Cleveland Software Designs, the bass shaker. Now we only have one this time, so rather than put it to the front, which is actually kind of closer to our accelerometer and give us headaches that way, and not put it all the way at the back, I'm kind of thinking we'll just put it in the middle and right about kind of as close as we can, but pretty close to our subwoofer, and not at the back, so we got room for our computer. So really, right there, all we got to do is kind of measure from side to side, make sure it's centered and not crooked this way for those other OCD people out there. And same thing, same screw, center punch, pilot drill hole, and screw that puppy down. Okay, next up is our addressable RGB computer fans that are pulse width modulated and grill. And so we've got one intake here and there's two exhausts at the back, so they're going to be done the same. Now, when you go to put this on, because this is an inlet and we want the air coming up this way, it matters which way you mount this. And if you're not sure, just imagine that this blade is going to be starting to spin when you turn it on. And you can put your hand on either side and give it a good spin and you'll be able to feel the direction of the air. So in this case, because the air is coming in this way, we want to mount it like that. Put the wires close to here so we're close to our cable management. And then when we actually go to mount this, we're going to put this underneath it. Make sure that it's not touching the fan. And then the bulgy part that sticks out a bit will actually go into the hole. So it'll mount like that. So because it's mounting like that, we can use this as a template. Center this, straighten it out, make our pencil marks, center punch, and then we're going to drill. This one is a 7/32 drill pilot hole because these are number 8 screws. And I've got these length enough to get through the fan, through the grill, and not quite poke out through the bottom. So let's go ahead and do those. And don't forget that this fan direction is going to be the opposite as this one, because we want to take what's in here and shove it outside. So don't forget that. Next up is our grounding strap. However, we need to have all of our external parts put back onto the cabinet so that we can actually hook it up to this grounding strap. And that includes getting our side plastic play-filled glass holder back in and our stainless side trim. Now, I've already shown you how to do this in great detail. If you missed that video, I'll put a link above to it for you so you can go watch that. Now, the only other thing I got to add to these is this is the final time going back on. So at this time, we're going to now put our double-sided 1-inch wide tape along the inside here so that when we put this on, it will stay attached to the cabinet. Now, a little word of hint here. If you're going to actually peel off the sticker and attach it to your vinyl, the next time these come off, you have to watch out that you aren't pulling on it and take off your vinyl. So if you are going to do that, what I would recommend is getting a razor blade and right underneath this edge, kind of upward angle, do a little slice along the vinyl so that if these ever have to come off, that vinyl will pull off, but it will only be what's underneath this and you won't see that. Now, another hint is I never actually removed my adhesive on mine, so it's just kind of there as an insulator backing. This is a private home machine. I don't think I'm going to have a lot of people pulling on this thing, and it's been okay for over a year now, so I think I'm going to do the same on this one too. All right, coin door in. And then the lockdown bar receiver goes in and it is sharing the top hole with the coin door. Okay, and because there is a little bit of play here, what I would do is kind of go all the way to one side, make a little temporary mark for yourself, and then go all the way to the other side, mark it on the wood again, and then go in between. And that's a pretty good accurate way of getting this thing roughly in the center. And then once you tighten it all down, I would get your lockdown bar and put it in and make sure that it's centered and it's not going in without any issues, etc. Now when you go to tighten these ones, keep in mind that there's just a hole drilled on the other side for the carriage bolt, which has like a square shape. So just kind of stop it from moving as you tighten it, and it should sink in and kind of press into the wood and make it so that it doesn't move. To put your lockdown bar in, what you got to do is take these tabs and put them into the rectangular holes here. And pull this lever over to the side there like that, and then this should sink down. Now, if it won't tighten up, meaning that you can't push this over and have the lockdown bar tighten down, you may have to loosen those 3 screws on the lockdown bar receiver just to get it so that you can kind of pull up on it before you tighten it down, and then you should be able to lever that over. Now, the next problem you might have is that the lever goes over, but this lockdown bar receiver might have a bunch of play in it, meaning it's not really fully tightened. So if that's the case, what you do is you take the lever over, take your lockdown bar out, and there are 2 screws right here that you could do little micro adjustments on how far this assembly down here hangs so that you can tighten up on it. And you just kind of sneak up on it, maybe 1/8 of a turn at a time. Keep trying it until you can't actually get any looseness and the lever goes all the way over. Spinning this screw clockwise will make it tighter and take the play out of that side of the lockdown bar. So if you've only got one side that's got play, you just do the 1 screw. If both are kind of evenly amount of play, then you could evenly tighten these screws clockwise just a little bit at a time. Take it in, test it, and adjust until there is no play. Okay, now to put your plunger together, you're going to take your housing and you have to slide in the little plunger housing liner or the sleeve. Like that, and then you can take the shorter compression spring and put it on your plunger rod, and then you can go ahead and slide that in. And then there is a washer that goes down here. Then you can take your other long compression spring and it goes down. And in order to hold this spring in place, there is a groove on here. So we just have to take the little snap ring, slide it down, and in this case this one's a little bit big, so we're just going to use a pair of pliers and squish it and make sure that it stays in its groove. There, like that. Now if this was real pinball, there'd also be a little kind of rubber bumper that goes on the end. And then the only other thing is you got your backing plate. So when you put this on the cabinet, this will go on the back, and then your screws put it in. All right, now to put the other side of your plunger together, you're going to need these 3D printed parts. So you can either buy them directly from Arnaud's website, or you can print them off yourself and then put them together like I am right now. So first thing is we're going to put this potar into this main body of the part. There's a little cutout here where this is going to sit in like so, and then the screws that were in the potar, they come out. And I kind of feel like it would have been awesome if these were a little longer so we could actually put them in. However, when I put it in the plastic, it doesn't actually touch the part. So these are a little too short. So what I did is I looked around the shop and found something. And for you guys, looks like it's an M3 fine-pitched machine screw. And what potar came with is by 4 millimeters long. And I'm finding that I needed it longer, so I made one that was 7, or if you were to get an 8 mil longer, that would work. Watch you don't go too long though, otherwise you're going to start digging into the circuit board with your screw. All right, so put this in like that. And then go ahead and put your screws in. Okay, make sure they're snug, but they are teeny tiny screws, so don't go too crazy tight or you're just going to start stripping out that screw hole. Okay, that's nice and snug. Perfect. Okay, next thing is the end of the plunger for the switch. So there are 2 holes in here in the 3D printed part, and so you're looking once again for a screw that is M3, Metrix 3 screw, but this time not a machine screw, but an actual kind of like a wood screw. So we want kind of like some nice threads to be able to dig in here. And then that's going to go in from the side once you slide this part on. And you know what? There's a bit of a gap there because it's kind of like a slot. So I've got a little M3 washer here I'm going to put on as well. Okay, I'll leave that one loose while I put the other one on. Just to make my life easier, I also pre-screwed that screw in so that it would kind of just thread in here for while I was filming. And then that allows you to adjust the end of where you're going to put the micro switch. So for right now, we can put it to wherever we want and just kind of snug it up. Probably put it kind of in the middle or something like that for right now. And once again, not too tight, just snug it up. There we go. All right. This little part goes in here. There's like a slot to fit over this part of the potentiometer so that when the plunger moves. And then you take your plunger assembly, and when we put it on the cab, this is going to go in from the front like this, and then press into that 3D printed part. That goes onto the potentiometer. And when this is screwed into the cabinet, you can see that this is going to move that potentiometer wherever the spring is. Now, there's one other thing in here that you may or may not need. And if you find that when you put this together, it's kind of not parallel, this part's not parallel with the plunger rod, there is a 3D printed piece that can go in like a wedge right in like that, and that will kind of bring up the plastic part up to where it should be. So you'll just have to see if you need that or not. It'll just depend on what your cab looks like. Okay, you don't have to use it, but if you need it, it's there. And then the only other thing we need when we put it on the cab is this plate. So like that. Okay, and then the last thing is putting on this momentary on switch so that the end of the plunger can hit it and you get an extra button. Now in the kit with these, it came with a little lock washer and a nut. However, this plastic's just a touch too thick, so we're going to ditch the lock washer and just put it in and put the nut on. And there we go. Now this is a 10 millimeter nut. And once again, don't go too crazy tight. It's just small little electronic stuff. All right, with this mounted in here, I can see that this little piece of plastic is literally bottoming out. So there's no way we'd be able to push on the plunger and get it to hit this. So it's pretty obvious to me that this has to go on before the little circlip so that this would be back here. And then you'd be able to push that forward and touch the micro switch. So let's go ahead and do that. So because this has to go on before the circlip, this isn't going to let us get it in there either. So we're going to have to put this onto the cabinet and then put that on. Okay, apparently there is quite the order of how this has got to go on, otherwise it won't work. So put this screw in the bottom first, and then we're going to be putting this in. Then screw it back in. Okay, then you can put this back on, and then screw the bottom one in. Before we tighten it, let's do the other top ones here. Now, before we get too carried away, because you're not able to get to this one very easy, let's check if we can plunger and touch this micro switch. Perfect. Yeah, that'll work. So that position's good. If not, to be able to get this off, you might have to undo it again and reposition this. Okay, and then the last thing is putting the spring back on. Press the spring and put this rectangle slot back onto the potentiometer wiper arm. And then push this whole thing back past the groove for the C-clip. And then just squish that C-clip back into the groove. Sweet, look at that. Linear potentiometer action plus a micro switch at the end. Awesome. Okay, now we have to put our ground wire on anything metal external. So our side rails, our plunger, our legs, all four of them, the coin door. So that way, if you are ever kind of shuffling up to your machine, building up static electricity, and then go ahead and touch your lockdown bar, there's the rare chance that you have some static electricity go and fry some of your boards. And the other reason we're putting this grounding strap wire is in case we have a hot wire. So something that's got live voltage comes off a mechanical toy, let's say, and ends up touching one of these metal pieces. You go up to the cabinet and touch that metal piece, and there's a good chance you can get electrocuted. So we have to connect this. We're going to start kind of in a logical order here. We'll just kind of go all the way down to the bottom of the leg, work our way up to the bolt for the side rail, get underneath the metal plunger, get underneath the lockdown bar, make sure it connects to the coin door, to the other lockdown bar, other side rail, and then we'll run a strip to the back to the last two legs at the back of the cabinet. And along the way, we're going to put it up to the case of a power supply. And that power supply case should be grounded, and we'll check that, and I'll show you how to do that. So we can check when we're all done to make sure everything is connected and grounded so we won't have any of these issues. Now you can totally just pierce this too right in the middle. It is kind of like braided so you can kind of go through it. That way it's still kind of connected around it. I put a washer on there just so I'm not twisting it too much. And then bolt it back in. Okay, and up to the machine screw and nylock nut for the side rail. Okay, I'm actually going to route this underneath the metal plate at the bottom here to get this to tilt up just a little bit more so it's even more parallel with the plunger rod. Perfect. And now with that wedge and that grounding strap underneath, it is dead parallel. Sweet. Okay, and then rather go up here and kind of get messed up with the lockdown bar receiver, I'm going to just route it straight down and then kick it down on the plywood underneath the coin door and get the bottom bolt with a washer into the grounding strap, and that will connect the coin door. And because the coin door shares a bolt with the lockdown bar receiver, it'll be grounded, and then because the lockdown bar touches this, that'll all be connected, and we can check that after. Then I'll come up here and continue on. Okay, and we're going to move on and just attach to the leg over here. Okay, and then up to our left playfield stainless trim. And then because I don't want to have to just run it all the way down to go down here to the back, I might just do one cut, attach it here and trim it, and then I can just attach another one to another leg screw here to go to the back. Okay, and then go all the way to the back leg. Okay, and then take your heavy-duty staple gun and you're going to attach that ground cable to the wooden cabinet in between those parts and make it look all pretty. So spend your time here, make everything look nice and straight and perpendicular, and it will look a lot better in the end. Trust me. Now that same staple gun drove those in really nice and tight in a wood cab, but with this laminate it just doesn't go in as deep as I'd like. So I'm just going to tap it in with a hammer, and it totally just snugs up that and makes it look a lot better. And the next key thing that we need for this grounding strap to work is that we have to ground it to something electrically. So what we're going to do is we're going to mount our power supply to the side of the cabinet and pin that ground cable behind it so it is touching this case. And on any of these cases, you can check to see if these are grounded or not. So on the actual electrical plug, go for the round ground plug and get yourself a multimeter, set it on a beep function or on a very low omega symbol for resistance. And then if you've got a beep function, whenever you touch these together, it'll beep so you know that they're connected. So if we take the ground and put it on the case, we know that if we touch that grounding strap to this case, then we're going to be electrically grounding it. So let's mount this into the cabinet. And then the last thing you got to do is take your multimeter, set on that continuity check or beep function, check to make sure it works. Perfect. Take the ground and put it on your ground lead or the round prong of your power cord for the power supply, and just go around and touch everything metal external, and it should beep if you've done it right. So side playfield, lockdown bar, leg, plunger, coin door, other leg, other left side strip, and then just check the other ones at the back, and then you're good to go. And while I'm at it, I might as well put in our power supply for the 5-volt lighting. I'm gonna put it on the other side of the cabinet. It's much the same as the other side, but it doesn't have to have the grounding set up to it. All right, I'm gonna add one more thing at the bottom of the cab before it gets buried in components, and that is a 3-inch hole. You're going to find out what that's about later in greater detail. So for now, all you need to know is I am putting a hole from the inside edge of the front cabinet back 6 inches, and centered between the left and the right is where I'm putting a 3-inch hole. So let's do that. Again, make sure you drill from the other side so you don't just tear it out on the bottom. That's a wrap in another video from Way of the Wrench. If you have any questions about what I did in this video, feel free to put them down in the comment section below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And any of the parts that you saw me install in here, all those links will be down in the video description below so that you can go find that for your build. So what's up next? I think I'd like to start putting some monitors in the back glass and get the back glass mounted just so I don't have it separate and floating around in the shop here. If you haven't already, why don't you join us on Instagram? That way you can see what's going on in the shop in between videos. And until next time, take it easy.